Hi everyone, this is William from the Headphone Experience, and I'm here tonight with a shootout between the old Kennerton Vali and the new 2019 edition of the Kennerton Vali. So this is a Vali versus Vali review. A couple nights ago I was doing my full review of the new version of the Vali, and I had compared it in several ways to the older version of the Vali. So I decided, hey, why not do a shootout between the two? I love both of these headphones, and they've got a lot in common, but yet there are some significant differences. So I thought I would, and the fact is they are both still available from Kennerton. So I decided, why not? Why not do a shootout? So I guess first of all, I'll start out with what they do have in common. They're both still available. They are both made by Kennerton Audio Equipment that is out of St. Petersburg, Russia. The older version of the Vali currently sells for between $948 US and $959, depending on, there's a couple choices of wood. And the newer version, there's more choices of wood types, and the price ranges from $959 US to $1,059. So basically they're the same price unless you get one of the more expensive woods. They are both full size over ear and open back headphones. They both use a 50 millimeter dynamic type of driver. I'm not sure if it's the same driver used in both or not, but they're both the same size. Both headphones use ear cups made of solid wood, not a veneer, not any plastic, anything like that. And they both use real lambskin leather on the ear pads and the headphone, or on the headband. They both have a impedance of 32 ohms, and they both have a sensitivity of 100 decibels at 100 milliwatts. So both are very easy to drive, and you should be able to drive either one of these with a portable device. I would think just about any portable should be able to drive these. About the last thing they do have in common is they both use the same magnesium grill. I'll try to show you both of them here. And the fact is, though, this is the newer one here. This is the older version, and the older version that is still available, the magnesium grill is now black, and the yolks are black on the older version now too. So this is probably about a year and a half old, this version, and like I said, they did change the yolks are black and the grills are black now. So anyway, starting out with the differences, the old version weighs in, and this is according to my kitchen scale, and I think it's pretty accurate, but the old version weighs in at 535 grams, that's including ear pads, but not the cable, and the newer version weighs in at 521 grams, which is about 14 grams less. They both both come with a 2 meter cable, but the older version uses a 4-pin mini XLR connection, and the newer version uses a 3.5 millimeter in both ear cups. The headband design is a major difference between the two. The older version used an aluminum yoke with a screw type adjustment. You could loosen that and adjust both the height and rotate the ear cup front to back with that adjustment. It's a little tricky to get these adjusted properly, but once you do, it locks down and it will never move. Unless you want to share the headphones, then you got a little bit of time involved getting it adjusted again. The new version uses a completely different yoke and head strap, and this is self-adjusting. It's very easy to you know, if you're switching back and forth between people, basically all you do is put it on and it self-adjusts, and that's the end of it. I have recently heard a little bit of concern about this type of headband, about the elastic eventually wearing out in these and the headphone becoming loose. So I don't know if that's a problem or not. The Kennerton Magni has the same type of design, and I've used it quite a bit over about 5 months and haven't noticed any wear or any loosening of the elastic yet. So I don't really know. You know, I guess time will tell on that. Another difference is the older version used a 95 millimeter ear cup and a 95 millimeter ear pad, which the newer version, and let me see if I can hold these both up and show you the difference. The newer version is 105 millimeters as opposed to 95, so it is a little bit bigger, and it does use larger ear pads. The ear pads both look pretty similar. They're both thick, like I said, real lambskin leather. They're both tapered front to back. Try to show you this. They are thicker in the back than in the front. Both have very thick and soft ear pads, but the new version, even though they're both lambskin leather, they are softer, a little softer and a little more comfortable. And the new version, because of it being 105 millimeters in diameter instead of 95, it does create a larger space, a little bit larger space on the inside and more room around your ears. So I guess that comes down to comfort, and well, I tell you what, let me get into the sound and I'll get back to comfort in a little while, because I already wrote it down in my notes and I don't want to get out of place. I'll get lost and forget something. So anyway, starting with the sound, they have some similarities, so I'll start with those. They are both what I would say are on the warm side of neutral, and they're both on the bassy side of neutral. They both have pretty significant emphasis in the bass. I would say the bass on the older version is slightly stronger, a little bit more weight. The mid bass, I'd say the sub bass is about the same on both, but I'd say the older version has a decibel or two more energy in the mid bass. Although the newer version, and I pointed this out in my full review, that the new version, because it has a larger ear pads, you are able to move it around on your head a little bit. And if you move it forward to back, if you move it forward, it has a little less space, and if you move it back, this is for me, I mean, it probably depends person to person how it seals up against your head. If I move it back, it gains a couple decibels in the mid bass and is real close to the same amount of bass as the older version of the Vali. Getting into the mid-range, that's where there's quite a bit of difference. The sound of the mid-range, the tone balance throughout the mid-range is very similar. They both have a lot of weight to the mid-range, and neither one ever sounds thin. They're kind of a rich, creamy sound to the mid-range. They're both similar in that respect, but the difference is on the older Vali, the mid-range, especially vocals, and that would be both male and female vocals, are just more upfront and present on the older version. They're just closer in and just a little more emphasized than they are on the new version. The new version, the vocals just sound a little more distant, a little set back on the stage compared to the new version. So that would be the biggest difference in the mid-range. Very similar sound, but it's kind of like the old version just has a couple more decibels of emphasis. in the vocal range, all the way from, the male to female vocals, where like I said, the new version, they just sound a little bit set back and a little distant. The treble is very similar on both of these. They both have good energy in the treble, good detail, bells, chimes, that sort of thing are very clear. There's good sparkle to the treble on both of them, but they both have a slight roll off in the upper treble. So this is not at all a bright headphone. If you find headphones like, say, most of the Hi-Fi Man headphones, like the Sandara, something like that, I know some people find those too bright. If you're one of those people, you will probably like the treble on these headphones. It's just a little bit of roll off on the top, so it never sounds harsh or bright. Getting into detail and resolution. Neither one of these headphones is the last word in detail. There are more detailed headphones. Wouldn't describe either one of these as analytical, but yet they both have very good detail, and on 95% of the music I have listened to, these headphones are capable of extracting all the detail that I hear on the recording. So comparing the two, I would say the old version has just a little bit more texture to the bass. I'm hearing a little more detail in the bass. And that's not condemning the new one at all, because they both have fantastic detail in the bass. In my opinion, the older version of the Vali has the best bass of any headphone I've ever heard at any price. Not the most, but the best, tightest, most solid, and most detailed and most textured bass I've ever heard. And the new one is very close, just slightly behind it. So both have very good detail and texture in the bass. The old version, like I said, the vocals are set a little bit more forward. So at first I thought that the older version had more detail in the mid-range. And now I'm not really sure about that, because I don't think the new version is lacking any detail. It's just the mid-range is toned down just a little bit. So, without that emphasis in the mid-range that the older version has, the newer one kind of creates the illusion of a little less detail in the mid-range, but I don't think that there is less. It's just toned down a bit. So, and like I said, a little more distant. So that's something you could maybe mess around with an EQ or something, if you wanted a little more energy in the mid-range, maybe, boost it up a decibel or two, or maybe cut the bass and treble a decibel. But anyway, but both of them are great the way they are. They're just a little bit different. The vocals are just a little more forward and a little more present and kind of in my face with the older version. The detail, like I said, is good in the trebles on both of them. The treble's very similar on both of these headphones, in my opinion. Imaging, I would say, is pretty close on both of these. It's good on both of them. It's not super pinpoint precise like, say, on the Kennerton Vali, but I talked about that a little bit in my last video, my full review of the new Vali. And because the imaging isn't pinpoint precise, it tends to fill in more of the soundstage. Each instrument is taking up a little bit more space. Instead of being from one point in space, it's filling up a little bit bigger area. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, in my opinion, because I feel more surrounded by the music, actually. The new Vali, just more than pretty much any headphone I've ever heard, just makes me feel surrounded and just completely engulfed in the music, and I really like that. So, it's not the most pinpoint imaging, but it's precise enough that I can hear where each instrument's coming from, but each instrument fills a little bit larger amount of space around me where there's not empty spaces in between. And I actually kind of like that on some music. I was listening to some Fleetwood Mac a couple days ago and was really enjoying it on the new Valley, and both the new and old Fleetwood Mac sounds incredible on both of them, and most classic rock does. The soundstage is average on the older Valley and very large on the new. I don't know why. They both use the same grill. It does have a slightly larger ear cup and a slightly larger ear pad. I don't know if that's what's making the difference, but the soundstage is definitely wider, and because of the vocals being set back a little bit, it seems to have more depth of the soundstage also. So definitely a bigger soundstage on the new Valley than on the old. Dynamics, I would say that that one definitely goes to the older Valley. Not that the new Valley lacks dynamics, it's kind of average as far as its punchiness, but the old Valley is probably the most dynamic headphone I've heard, and it just really has a lot of punch in the mid bass, up in the drum range. Even like piano notes and things like that, even snares, even cymbals, just very dynamic. Just everything hits hard, a very punchy sound. So like I said, the new Valley isn't that dynamic. It's more of an average, and you know, that's once again, that's, you know, dynamics is great, but if a headphone's, you know, very dynamic, it gets fatiguing a little faster. It can wear you out a little faster. So, you know, that's a matter of personal choice too. You know, I mean, a really dynamic headphone isn't always the best thing. If you want to do some relaxed listening before bed or something, you know, a headphone that's has a little bit softer sound can be good. So, not necessarily a winner there. Comfort, hands down the new one. The new Valley is definitely more comfortable. It's slightly lighter. It has a self-adjusting headband, but I would say the main reasons that without a doubt it's more comfortable is, first of all, there's less clamping force on it. I have no problems with the comfort of the old Valley. I mean, I can listen to this for hours and it doesn't bother me, but they're both a little bit on the heavy side, and heavy headphones, I've mentioned this many times, heavy headphones don't bother me. But the only thing about the old Valley that does bother me sometimes, and it can get to me after a couple hours of listening, the clamping force is a little bit tight and it does squeeze on my head a little bit. And sometimes it gets me right in front of my ear where my joint of my jaw is. Sometimes the pressure gets to me a little bit there. So anyway, the new Valley, different kind of headband design, self-adjusting, and anyway, I think the biggest difference is, like I said, there's less clamping force in this design. Plus, the ear pads are larger, so it spreads the weight out more. And the ear pads are softer. You know, not significantly, but they are definitely softer. So I guess the combination of slightly lighter weight, a little less clamping force, bigger ear pads, and a little bit softer ear pads, and without a doubt, the new Valley wins in the comfort shootout. So getting into listening fatigue. That would be, you know, just getting worn out from listening to the music. You know, nothing to do with comfort really, but like I said, the older Valley is more dynamic, so that, you know, can get a little fatiguing after a while. But neither one of these headphones ever sounds harsh. They both have a slight roll off in the upper treble, so the treble's not going to get to you and wear out your ears. and neither one of these ever sounds sibilant. So I would say the listening fatigue factor is very low on both of these, but I'd give a slight advantage to the newer Valley because of being a little bit softer sound, a little less dynamic. The new one, I can wear it for hours on end and never have any listening fatigue. And as far as comfort, there's not going to be any comfort fatigue on the new one either, unless the weight, which at 521 grams is a little bit on the heavy side. Some people that will get to them. Doesn't bother me, but so the only way I think you're ever going to get fatigued with the new Valley is if the weight eventually gets to you. The older version, slightly heavier and a little more clamping force. So, but I give that one both listening fatigue and the comfort to the new Valley. Both of these headphones are very forgiving as far as less than perfect recordings. Like I said, they both have good detail, but neither one of them is what I'd describe as analytical, and they're not going to pull out, every little flaw in the recording. They're not going to point out or make obvious, a little bit of background hiss in the studio or whatever, studio noises. And because of that, I would say both of these headphones, you're going to be able to listen to your entire music collection. I've tried some headphones that I would consider, sort of analytical. And my experience is the more analytical a headphone is, the more detailed it is, the less of your music collection you will eventually listen to. You're gonna, reach a point where you're listening to your 10 best recordings over and over and over, and most of your music collection's going ignored with a really analytical headphone because it sounds so good with a perfect recording, but when you have less than a perfect recording with an analytical headphone, you're gonna hear all those little flaws, you're gonna hear all that, and you're gonna want to keep going back to what really sounds good. So if you want an analytical headphone and you're only going to listen to 10% of your collection, go for it. But if you want a headphone that you can listen to your entire collection, all but the very worst recordings, and they're still going to sound good, either one of these headphones is going to be great for that. And I pointed this out in my previous reviews. The older Valley was my number one favorite headphone for listening to rock and listening to electronic, pop music, dance music, that sort of thing. With the bass, the emphasis in the bass and the dynamics and the punchiness, it became my favorite headphone for rock and electronic. And the new Valley is just slightly behind that. Slightly less bass, slightly less, a little less dynamic, doesn't have that hard-hitting punch the way the older one does, but still, once again, a great headphone for rock, electronic, dance music, that sort of thing. If you're primarily listening to jazz, acoustical, orchestral music, you might want something a little more analytical, a little more detailed, and a little more neutral as far as tone balance. In that case, you might want to check out Kennerton's Odin or Thror. They're both fantastic for those. Or other brands, the Hi-Fi Man Aria, fantastic headphone, very detailed, sounds great with orchestral and jazz and that sort of music. Anyway, what it basically comes down to is I'm still a little undecided. I know I called this a shootout, but I can't really call a clear winner here because I really like both of these headphones. The new one, I love the comfort factor. I love the big sound, the larger sound stage. There's just a lot about it I really like. The older version, I do like that dynamic, the dynamics, the hard hitting, in the bass and all that. And, if I'm not sharing the headphone and the adjustments don't make a difference, you know, I kind of like the old style of headband actually. But so what I would say, you know, it's kind of a tie in my opinion, but it depends what you're looking for. I would say the old version is probably more fun. You know, has a higher fun factor. You know, listening to rock and dance music and all that, it just has slightly more bass and just hits a little bit harder. And because of that, I'd say it's more fun to listen to. The new version, I'd say, is a little closer to neutral, you know, and a little more laid back. And if you want something you can listen to for hours without fatigue, the new version's probably the way to go. So, you know, they're both about the same price. They're both great headphones in my opinion, both very easy to drive. So I would say old version for fun factor, new version if you want something a little more laid back and a little more neutral. So anyway, that's about it. I'm going to wrap this up. And once again, this is William from the Headphone Experience. If this video has helped you with your decision, please give me a thumbs up. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, and you are all welcome to join us over at the Headphone Experience on Facebook. Thank you.